Hey, F50 women, thank you so much for joining us today. I am here with Terri Short. She is a leader. She is an award-winning author, and she's got some amazing things in store that we're going to hear about. I'm just going to say thank you so much, Terri, for joining us.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
We all have to lead off and get to know you, introduce yourself, and especially tell us about who you were as a younger woman. What were you like? What did you want to do? What did you want to be? Tell us a little bit about that.
I wanted to change the world, and I'm still working on that.
Yes. Yes.
I was very much supported by my father and came to believe that I could do anything. At a very young age, I was working for him at his company. I was the only woman in the field ordering steel and
Oh,
wing
okay.
nuts and crazy things like that. I really had to find my way in a world of electrical and mechanical engineering. I did procurement. I ordered things. So I'd get on the phone and these people would be so shocked. They'd say, "Where's the manager? Who should we talk to?" And I'd think, "That's me."
That's me.
That's me. Yeah. And I really felt, Julia, like I fought that my whole life. I was in my early 20s. I managed a restaurant in San Francisco on
Mhm.
Pier 39, and people would say, "We'd like to speak to the manager." And I'd show up and they'd say, "No, we asked for the manager." And they thought I was.
Seriously.
So I felt like that was in my face all the time. Your question, what I wanted to be or where I started was the
Mhm.
cotton candy girl at the local country club pool area. It was the lowest job, cotton
Oh,
candy girl. I had a window, spun my cotton candy, hand it to you. The
yeah.
next, the very next year, I was the leader. I was the manager of that same
Wow.
facility.
So I wonder what it is about you that makes that just happen. Have you ever thought about that? How do I keep jumping and taking charge of things?
That's an excellent question. It's a belief. Like I mentioned my father early on, I just had this innate belief. And I would
Okay.
say to myself over and over again, of course you can. People would say, well, you don't know anything about running the snack bar. And I'd play in the back of my head, of course I can. I can do that. You
Wow,
can't do that.
okay.
Whenever anybody says, you can't do that to me, I think to myself, of course I can. That's what it was. Every time I've changed jobs or I've done something different, even writing the book,
Yeah.
my own mother said to me, "You don't know anything about writing the book. You might be able to write it, but you won't get it published." And I said, "Of course I can."
Really? Yeah. Watch watch out. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
Uh,
So you did, how was that when you worked with your father? What ages was that?
18,
That's
19.
young, you
Yeah,
see?
I was very
Yeah.
young.
And you said he was the one that told you you can pretty much do anything.
He did.
Yeah.
He had my back when I'd speak to these big distributors and steel distributors. I did a lot of research. I wanted to excel at it. So I did my research and I'd go out in the shop and understand what I was ordering. When they doubled back to him to fuss about, having to deal with me, or was I really the person that was going to order these, thousands of dollars of steel? And he would say, absolutely. Of course she can. you know,
That's
right?
great. And you
Mhm.
were not nervous? So you never second guessed yourself. Like, I'm just wondering, it's
I would
hard
say I
if for
would.
people who are not that way, it might be hard to grasp. How do you do that? When, what do you mean? I just tell myself, of course you can. Well, of course you can, Julia. Well,
Fair
how do
enough.
you
Fair
fight the
enough.
doubts? How do you fight the fears? I mean, steel.
Yeah.
What if I order a piece that's too short? I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. The beauty then was that I was on the telephone. It was all done by telephone. Had I had to go to a meeting, and that actually came up once, the person said, we didn't have email or anything. It was a long time ago.
Right.
But someone left a message once and said, can we meet for lunch? And I thought, oh, no, 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 we can't meet for lunch. Then they'll know. But they knew by my voice I was a woman, but they didn't know I was 18.
Right.
18, 19. I
Yeah.
did it 18, 19, and 20. So I was on the phone. It's almost like that when you're picking up the phone when you're younger to ask somebody to go on a date. And yes, of course, as a woman, I did do that, even though that
Okay.
was like odd. But you have that nervousness. So you're just sort of shaking a little bit. But the very beginning, I was always like that before I
Okay.
picked up the phone. But again, I would steel myself, so to speak,
Yeah.
with the knowledge that I had when talk to the people in the shop and learn about the product. And I'd have all my notes and I'd get on the phone with great confidence. Before I got on, I'd center myself.
Mm.
I did not see it that way then. I did not meditate. I didn't have what I call centering thoughts. I didn't have a mantra that I told myself to support myself, other than, yes, I can. Of course
Right.
I can. But I just would pause long enough to summons that energy and that confidence, and then I would do it. I know for sure that each time I did that, it built upon itself. Like the
Yes.
confidence I have today built upon each hurdle, each success builds upon the next one. And
The
the next
next
thing you know,
one.
you have tons of confidence.
Then you're like, go ahead, tell me I can't do it. I dare you.
Right.
So let's just jump over the meaty middle and tell us about you now. Tell us about what you do, who you are, what kind of work you do, and all that stuff.
Absolutely. Well, I'll connect a few dots. I had quite the
Okay.
career with Four Seasons Hotels as a
Okay.
leader with Four Seasons Hotels. So I was on hospitality,
Okay.
started my own business when I was
Mhm.
starting my family. People said, "You can't have a
Yeah.
family." I had a general manager with Four Seasons say, "You cannot have it all. You cannot have a family and a career." And I thought, yes, I can.
Right?
So when I started with the idea that we were going to build a family, I thought, well, I better have my own business and be my own CEO so that I could have more control over my time. So I did have my
Mhm.
business for 15 years, specifically coaching and consulting, leadership development,
Yeah.
but mostly in hospitality. The next thing you know, I was invited to the local hospital. I lived in Montana, and they said, "We would like you to be on the team." And other people said, "You don't know anything about healthcare.
Oh,
You can't
goodness.
do that." I said, "Yes, I can."
Of course I can.
And I wanted to learn. I did take probably the world's largest pay cut that year. But anyway, I
Okay.
transitioned from hospitality to healthcare. I'm obsessed with how people communicate. I was in hospitality thinking, this is not what you say to a client, and this is not how you lead your people. And so
Yeah.
I got becoming obsessed with the words people chose.
Yeah.
And then I thought, wait a minute, instead of taking care of the needs of the rich and famous, I would love to use my skill set to help the vulnerable. When I
Wow.
had that opportunity in healthcare, pay cut aside, I thought I can help leaders be better at what they do and then ultimately interact with patients much higher, better level, and became passionate about that. So 10 years in
Yeah.
that. And then in 2019, back to my own business, coaching, consulting, and I wrote a book. I had
Okay.
it always in my head since I was in college. I always thought someday I'll write a book. I wasn't as good at it as I am now. It was more happenstance, but I was contemplating things that I intended to manifest. Now I'm much more specific about it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. You refined that as you went through life and
Yeah.
the different opportunities. Is there anything in between those 2 points that changed things? What is the one thing that changed everything for you?
That's so interesting. People ask me that a lot. What was
Really?
this one big thing? There wasn't a big thing. It was a series of things. It was a series of successes that kept leading me forging forward and saying, yes, I can, and I'm going to do this, and really never looking back. So, to that end, though, as I was doing it, I started to contemplate more about who I was competing with. I've always been very competitive. At university, I played lacrosse and hockey. And
Okay.
actually, when I was 53, I started playing hockey again. I
All
played for a
right.
couple of years. I've always been very competitive. This is the one thing I can tell you switched for me. Early on, I was competing in a male dominated world. I was competing with the men. I felt it all the time. I just felt that I had to represent myself. And then
Yes.
all of a sudden, I thought, no, wait a minute. I'm okay. I'm not okay. I'm fabulous as I am. And so if
Yeah.
I'm the only skirt at the table, I don't have to speak up in a way that proves I know and that I'm eligible to be there. I'm going to more show them by my actions, and I'm going to ask them questions, and I'm going to then have them rely on me and my unique female specific qualities and
Yes.
my communication skills and maybe what they might consider soft skills. And I excel at those. So now
Yeah.
I'm not going to compete with anybody. I'm going to compete with myself in order to show up as who I am and
Yeah.
to help others in the way that I can. So that's the shift that happened for me from
Okay.
competing with others, with other women
Yeah.
and men, and now only competing with myself and
Yeah.
challenging myself. Right.
Nice. Do you find that's true with other female leaders that you work with, that that is a transition they need to make as well? Just really trying to
Mhm.
try to fight the boys and not use your inherent female skills, which are
Right.
powerful.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
And I think sometimes as women we spend a lot of time trying to prove we're have some skill better than another woman even. And it's just
Okay.
simply not about that. That's like the single biggest switch in my mind. So it's
Okay.
not something that happened. It's just something that I
Grew into. That's
yeah.
fantastic. Yeah. thinking about how we compete with each other as women. I always focus on how we compete with men, but we compete
Right.
with each other too. Yeah.
We do.
So, did you have a mentor? Did you have somebody what do you call that when you watch somebody, a role model? I know
Mhm.
you talked about your father, but was there anybody that helped you along to nudge you one way or the other, or that you went to help you with some rough spots?
Yeah, I don't know why it occurred this way, but I felt like I was always struggling to find a woman to fill that role. That was
Right.
always men. And I had this one in my Four Seasons days. I had a boss who was, I'd be in a meeting and we'd come out and he gave me candid, immediate feedback. This is when I was starting to learn. I didn't have to spout off what I knew. He'd say, you might have been more effective if you'd hold that back and ask deeper questions. He was helping me to see that, right? Eventually, I do have a mentor. Finally, I find this woman. She's a general manager of this boutique hotel in San Francisco. I'm like, okay, she's
Yeah.
done it. She's gotten there. I'm going to have her. Well, lo and behold, I am wooed by another hotel, which was the Four Seasons. So I leave, but she agrees to still be my mentor. I'm there only a few months, and they want to make me the executive housekeeper. I was 25, Julia. It was the
Okay.
only five-star, five-diamond hotel in all of San Francisco. And I
Wow.
was 25 and they were about to undergo a renovation. So I asked her to meet me for a drink. We sit down and I say, well, and she knew all the players because she was a GM in that community. So anyway, I sit down with her and I say, they've offered me, and this, the general manager at the Four Seasons was
Four Seasons.
very well known. He's offered me executive housekeeper. And she puts her drink down and she said, well, then I hope you declined. You can't do that.
Really?
You
Uh-oh.
can't have
She
that
should know
job.
better than to tell you that, right?
I just looked at her. I thought, wait a minute, this is my mentor.
Boring me. Yeah.
Right. And I'm thinking, if anybody's going to second guess, it should be me. I went there to get her encouragement. And she said that. And I left there going, "Oh, yes, I can. Of course I can."
That's right. Of
Did
course
it.
I can do that.
Yeah. But anyway, my point is that I've struggled to have female mentors. And so now I'm very aware of that. I'm very aware of offering myself as a mentor to
Nice.
women. And the weird thing about that is that as I've had these leadership positions and such, these days I get a lot of calls from men that I mentored along the way, or they worked under me in some capacity. And
Yeah.
they'll call and say, I need some Terri time, or what do I do about this difficult situation? And they reach out. And I find that some of these men do that even more. Maybe that's a reflection of how I availed myself to them, but
Right.
they're not afraid to ask for help and guidance. I would
Interesting.
suggest that women open up to that as well.
You might not get what you're looking for or get the support you need, but you got to keep asking like
That's
anything
right.
else.
And of course, I'm going to always say, yes, you can. When
That
the
is
person
so
comes to
great.
me, yeah, as a coach, I've learned to ask the right probing questions to
Yeah.
peel back the layers of what might be holding someone back from saying yes, they can.
Yeah.
And what I like to call their personal podcast. So we all have,
Yes.
we're listening to your
We
podcast
do.
and yeah, but we have this personal podcast plays 24/7.
Yeah.
Right?
It
It's always
really
playing.
does.
And so those words that we are choosing for that podcast, we're in
Yeah.
control of it. We're the host, the director, the producer. We decide who comes on. I'm very much in tune to helping people understand that, how they control. I say
Yeah.
the voice is a choice. That one
Yes,
playing in your head. Yeah.
it is. And we think that even if we don't think we can control it, I don't even think we oftentimes know it's running. It's just
Right.
running
That's right.
wild.
That's right.
So you're 25, you've got this incredible position, this very powerful position. Your ego never got bigger than your belief, if that makes sense. Did your ego sort of like, I've arrived, I'm the woman. And so where it became all about you to the point where you almost got afraid that others might take it away from you,
Hmm.
if that makes
No,
sense.
that's a good question. But at that point, I was still competing against the men. I was the only skirt in those days. And then I moved from that
Yeah.
Four Seasons to the one in DC, and I was the only skirt around that board table.
Okay.
And so yeah, no, that wasn't going to happen for a long time because I was
Okay.
still trying to prove myself,
Right.
prove my value at the board table. And yeah, so
Okay.
no, it wasn't so much a struggle because I had that confidence, but I had to work at it. I had to work at keeping my narrative going in a positive direction, even
Yeah.
when there were hurdles with what my next steps were and such. And so
Yeah.
that's right when I was starting to turn, and I'm in this by myself, or not by myself, but I'm in this for myself. And it's not a reflection on other people and the job
Okay.
they get or what they do. And I started feeling more about it being competitive with myself as opposed to
Yeah.
someone else. And that's when I have the mentor, the male, who's giving me feedback. I mean, he gave me feedback every day. And that was
Nice.
super helpful. I think that's something too that if I was going back and doing it differently, I didn't ask for that. He just knew to give it to me. Now I would ask for that.
You would
Now I
ask
would
for that.
say, yeah.
Okay. So that leads into the other question about if you were to meet your younger self, would the one thing you would tell her? Is that it?
Oh, Julia, please don't make me only say one thing.
No, you definitely no. If there's more, I
I've
usually
got
just say
four
one
things.
thing, but
I've
if you
got
have
four
more,
things.
please, yes.
I got four things.
Yeah.
Show, don't tell. The telling was me almost acting out to prove myself.
Okay.
Show, don't tell.
Okay.
Keep that mantra in your head.
Yes.
Compete with yourself as opposed to others.
Okay.
And the last one is meditate. I wasn't meditating at the time. I journaled what I wanted in another year or 5 years, but it was pretty random. It was
Right.
like there wasn't a practice I have now. No, I wasn't practicing anything. I was just randomly dreaming things up. That's
Right.
part of it. I was manifesting that or putting those thoughts in a journal, and then they came to be. So
Okay.
that's why I say meditate, journal, get your thoughts and desires out there, because until you get them out in the universe, it's not going to happen. All the
Right. Yes.
confidence in the world can't bring it along until you imagine what it is that you want.
Right. If you imagine it, it's sort of that if you don't ask, you can't receive anything.
That's right. Exactly.
So I really want to talk about what's next. I'd like to talk about your book. What is the book name? I really want to talk about that book because you shared a few times about the words in your head and the podcast in your head. From what you're saying about how you kept saying, of course you can. Of course I can.
Yeah.
I want to know about the words we choose and why they're so valuable. So tell us about the book and tell us about what is next.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I published the book during the pandemic, so that's
Wow. Okay. So it's
fantastic.
recent. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it's very recent, actually. We went to New Zealand for 3 weeks. We got there on March 13th of 2020. That was the day
Wow.
everything closed down, right?
Yes. Oh
And
no.
we were there for a 3-week trip and stayed 54 weeks.
Wow.
So I came back
This
this
is-
past March, right?
Oh my
The end of March.
goodness.
So I got my book written. This is another thing. You do not need a pandemic to write a book. I followed an outline that was given to me, and I fix it up even more. I believe anybody can write a book and that everybody has a book in them. It's just
Okay.
a matter of having the discipline. So anyway, so I wrote the book. And why did I write the book? For years in hospitality and healthcare, I got to be very sensitive to the words people chose
Okay.
when speaking to others. As I started coaching, I could hear when a client was telling me the words they were choosing for themselves, and I would think, no, that is
Yeah.
not helpful. And
Yeah.
we choose words that limit and minimize ourselves and others. And it doesn't have to be that way. And we can
Okay.
choose ones that inspire, support, and influence. So let me give you some examples. Some of the more common ones that I hear. I grew up on the East Coast, and
Mhm.
I lived in the world of the shoulds. And I would have that narrative myself saying, I should this and I should that. And I had to bust through that. Should is limiting me to somebody else's perception, something that I'm believing from somebody else.
Got it.
You're on the East Coast. I think
Yes.
you might know about those shoulds.
Yes.
I moved to California, and it's a free for all here. There's
Okay.
not such a sense, at least in my 20s. That's how I felt. I lived in San Francisco in my 20s,
Yeah.
and I could feel that anything was possible, and there wasn't anybody ever speaking to me about the should. So that's one example. But there are words that limit too. The word but, whenever somebody says something or I say something, and then but,
Yeah.
I've just negated what came before, regardless of what I say after. I've truncated that thought. Or if you say something and I say, but you should consider this, I've minimized what you said,
Yeah.
right?
I absolutely agree with that. Yes. I try not to do the but. It's hard.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
hard. And then
Yeah.
sometimes we say however instead. And I had somebody tell me recently that however is but in a tuxedo.
It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah, that's right. So what do you use instead? And I challenge the listeners to think about every time they say but, to pause and think how they could say and. even for difficult things. I have leaders I coach that are doing a reduction in force or what have you, and they need to share that information. They'll want to say, but we have to do this, blah, blah. And I say,
Right.
wait a minute. Now you
You've been
can
a
say,
great set
and
of
now you can say, and we have an opportunity to, and then go on from that. So that if replacing it with and, it's the glue, whereas but's the scissors that cuts it, and is the
yeah.
glue that pieces together the two different thoughts. And I
Mhm.
challenge everyone to do that. You can't unsee the list. So you also can't change them all at one time,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So one of the ones during the pandemic that I believe has been unhelpful is people started saying if all the time. If we
Okay.
get back to the office, if we're able to travel again, if limits. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe sort of kind of
Yeah.
hopefully.
But
And
probably not. Yeah.
but probably not. That's right.
Yeah.
But instead, if we say when we return to the office, when we're able to travel again, it's more uplifting, it's more affirmative and
Yes, it is.
positive. Those are some
Yeah.
examples.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I have to see this fast company list that listed out. Are all those words listed out in your book?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There are
Okay.
different sections. Some of them have their own sections. For instance,
Okay.
the word just,
Yeah.
particularly for women, it makes me crazy when I
Yeah.
hear somebody say, I'm just the dietitian. And I think to
That's
myself, wait a minute, you're responsible for the nutrition of this patient. And until they can eat properly and their body functions properly, they're not leaving. So the
yeah.
role you play is incredibly important,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So just removing just
Yeah.
is a big step, and
Yeah.
owning who you are or what it is. Or even sometimes it's not about the person. I hear people say, I just wanted to take a few minutes of your time and I just
Mhm.
want to show you an update on my report. I want to show you an update on my report
Yes.
or on my project. And that's important. The minute I say just, I've minimized it.
Do you feel like women use the just more than men? Yeah, I felt you'd say
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. Another one the women use more is think. They
Hmm.
say, I think we'll be able to meet the such and such goal, or I think this will happen. Let's stop
Yeah.
thinking about it. Like just
Yes.
own it and say, we will be able to make
Yeah.
progress. Sometimes I believe I hear women say it because they don't want to feel too dominating.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
not about that. Own the message and own it. And you can say it in a soft, collaborative way. There's no
And
reason to minimize it by choosing the word think.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of them. That's great.
Yeah.
I am going to try to do that because I know I do some of those as well. And it's disempowering to yourself because you
Right.
do feel sort of like, well, I just wanted to talk to you, but you might not have time. It's sort of that apologetic kind of thing. Oh,
Well,
yeah.
Julia, you just weaved a whole bunch of them together. I just want to speak to you, but, and then you
Yeah.
said you might not. So
Yes.
might's another one. And then so that by the time we're weaving them all together, that's like, wow.
You might as well forget it. Go back to your office. Don't even bother. Yeah.
That's right.
So tell us about what's next. What's coming up? How can we engage?
Absolutely. Well, I am now collaborating with a couple of other women. We have this very diverse team.
Mm.
One is a student of universal shamanism. She
Oh,
calls herself the joyful shaman because she's a joyful person who has had an amazing loss in her life and has come out of that beautifully. The other one is a spiritual doula and a sound conduit. And then I'm the CEO business type. So, what we've done is we've created the Thriving Leader Collaborative, and we'll be hosting 4 retreats in 2022. The fourth one's in Costa Rica. Our intent is to help leaders, men and women. The first one is actually female specific, but we'll engage with men as well, because that's how we're going to
yeah.
progress as a species when we
Yeah.
get this together. Being a thriving leader and finding joy in leading others comes at the intersection of what we call woo woo and win win. So woo woo being all things that people think of as to attend to their spirit. So whether or not it's meditation, movement, sound, we actually have 6 key components: self-awareness, community, movement, presence, intuition, and energetic hygiene. There are actions under each of those. How do you make the best of these components of what we call woo woo or your spiritual balance
Yeah.
in order to inform your professional and personal sense of win-win, the things that you desire to create a win-win. We
Okay.
believe that the intersection of those two, so the more you combine those two, the more joy there is, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we're coaching. I coach that in my business coaching and leadership coaching. But one-on-one, we want to make a bigger splash. We also feel that having several days together is the way that people make that whole transformation. So that's what
Okay.
we're doing. Wrapped up in there are your word choices. There's a lot more as far as word choices and such. Yeah,
Yes. And so that's the win-win part.
that's right.
You-
And in the win-win part, we have what I call 6 personas of a thriving leader, being the ambassador of the culture of your organization, being the leader as a coach, how you interact with those that report to you,
Mhm.
being a continual change agent, or what I call a chaotic expert, the person
Okay.
who can embrace the chaos and provide the order, being a life integrator, the person who does quite well at
Mhm.
life work balance
Okay.
as opposed to work life balance,
Yeah.
being emotionally and intuitively intelligent, and
Mhm.
last but not least, being a productive and proactive juggler. So that person who can get
Yeah.
lots done and juggle things well. And that's born out of the types of things I coach very routinely. So
Okay.
they're different things under each of those 6 personas.
So now how long would this retreat be, do you think? Would it be a week or a
No, the
long
first 2,
weekend or yeah.
the first 2 are weekends. So the one
Okay.
in March is a weekend and May is a weekend.
Okay.
And then in the summer, we're still looking for the location in the Rocky Mountains for a 5-day. And
Nice.
then Costa Rica is a 5-day. It's at what's called the Imaloa Institute. I wish I could make them all 5 days, but not everybody has that time and we want them to
Right.
be
Be
accessible,
able.
right? We're going to do. And then once this year we get through what we're offering this year and fine tune things, we'll offer more. Hopefully we'll offer one a month so that
Okay.
we can really help, and we're creating a community around that. So a community around of thriving leaders.
Yeah, so you
Yeah.
can continue because
Yeah,
it may be a continual growth process because that's a lot to sort of transform if you've been doing leadership one certain way. Uh,
that's right.
how do you feel like leaders are open to the woo-woo?
A good question. They're becoming all the time. So I coach many people in Fortune 500 companies, and they
Yeah.
have moments of meditation. They have,
Okay.
yeah, it's starting. It is absolutely starting. And
Okay.
I'm designing a calendar, like sort of a calendar option about how you start your day, and that you get outside, how much time you get
Yes.
outside in the day. And so the things that you build in that, we teasingly say woo woo because that's such a spectrum. I had
Yeah.
a guy last week tell me that he was talking about communication and he said, well, I think communication is a little woo woo. And I thought, we have so much work to do. Such a spectrum of what people consider woo woo, right?
Yeah.
And so we want to take the mystery out of it and
Yeah.
just sort of open it up to all that's possible that serves one's spirit and one's ability to show up in a joyful place.
Yeah. Right. Yes. So I'm looking forward to that. When you said it's going to be in 2022. I don't know if you want to tell us now or tell us at the end how to connect with it.
Mhm. Yeah, actually, this is a very timely interview.
Okay.
We just stood up last week the website
Okay.
thrivingleadercollaborative.com, and that's where you learn about who we are and what we're doing. There are links to the retreats, and the first 2 are in the same place in California. It's a beautiful place called Mount Madonna. It's
Okay.
up on the hill overlooking the Monterey Bay. Those are the ones in March, ones in May, and then we'll take it from there.
This is not a virtual experience.
That's right. Another thing I feel strongly from interacting with others is that the time is right for us to get back together
Yeah.
and for us to be in community with like-minded,
Yeah.
others of like mind, and specifically to up our game with what we do from attending to our spirit and leading from a place of joy. This past 20 months, it's been a little joyless.
Yeah.
It's
It's been
like,
a little crazy.
yeah. And so let's help each other and collectively in the
Yeah.
world get back to a better place.
Yeah. Let's emerge from all of that.
Leave it
Time to
behind.
transform. Yeah.
That's right. Leave it
Yeah.
behind. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
So will you give us a little bit of advice from your playbook? Like what is one book that you would advise all women to read? Of course,
All
your
right,
book
my book.
one.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
the second one.
Okay. Now this is going to strike you as odd, I think,
Mhm.
because I love this book. I just pass it on to everybody.
Okay.
Anyway, it's Braiding Sweetgrass, and the woman's name, I always want to get it right, is Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Okay.
Kimmerer. And here's why.
Mhm.
So it's nonfiction. And Robin is a mother of two daughters. She's a biologist, she's a Native
Okay.
American, and indigenous. She wraps all that together so beautifully to help us understand, particularly as women, our role in this larger world. She does that by helping us understand how much of the flora and fauna relates to each other and how we are a part of that.
Yeah.
And so from her scientific background, but then also her spiritual and motherhood comes into, and she wraps
Mhm.
that all up so nicely that you're just pleased to be on this earth at this time, and particularly in a female body. That's how I
Okay.
see it. I just think it's a book everyone should read.
And that's a fiction book?
Nonfiction. No,
Oh,
it's nonfiction.
nonfiction. Okay,
Yeah,
so I thought you said
nonfiction.
fiction. I was gonna say,
No,
how did she
maybe I
do
said that
that?
by accident. It's
Okay,
nonfiction. Yeah.
nonfiction. Okay. Braiding Sweetgrass.
Yes. And it reads like fiction
Interesting.
because she's a really good writer. She just ticks all the boxes. Yeah.
That's a good one, especially from my perspective, when you're fighting between being a working person, being a
Mhm.
mom, taking care of your home, taking care of the home, taking care of your parents. Where do I fit?
Right.
And what does women mean? I
Yeah.
don't know if
Mhm.
my mom and our generations before had that problem, but I feel like we do.
And it's incumbent upon us in these conversations and the work you're doing and bringing these stories to light.
Yeah.
It's incumbent upon us to do that for the younger generation. I
Yeah.
have a daughter about to turn 24, and every other month I'm talking to her about her position in a male dominated industry.
Okay.
you know, so I'm like,
Yeah.
I can help with this.
You can help her with that.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. But here's what's fascinating about this. When I was her age, I didn't think there would be such a thing by the time I had a daughter who was
Right.
in her mid 20s.
Yeah.
I thought that it would all dispel that that
It
is
would be
not the
different.
case. So
Nope.
there's still work to do. And
Yeah.
I'm so happy you're doing it.
Yeah. Has she shared any challenges she's had that
Oh yeah.
are different or similar? I don't know if there
No, it's
could.
very simple. And I just think she had this one boss this couple years
Mhm.
ago. And the things he said to her, some of the sexism and blatant disregard for a woman's role, I just felt like, oh, it was so 80s or even the 50s.
When
What
you
he
heard
said
what
to
she
her, it's a bit of a head slap. I'm just like, how is that possible?
can we
Yeah.
grow? Can we move beyond it?
I do feel strongly that
Mhm.
now more women are finding their voice and there's a deeper connection spiritually.
Yeah.
I feel like the progress will be exponential. We are currently accelerating
Accelerating. Yeah.
the progress. And
Yeah.
it's so good to be a part of that. And here's an example. She is approaching it way differently than I did. The way she's communicating, the way she's standing up. I think the new generation, they're exactly what I was saying earlier in the end of this
Mhm.
interview is that it took me a while to compete
Right.
only with myself and to find my voice, not having to show up and clobber somebody over the head with what I wanted to say. And yeah, so I just feel like this generation they're getting it faster. They're getting
Okay.
it faster. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. And hopefully we can continue to help them to get it,
Right. That's
to
our
make
job.
that momentum.
That's right.
Yes.
Now that's
Yes.
our job. Yeah.
So what would you say is one thing that you have to do every day?
Meditate.
I knew you were going
Meditate.
to say
Yeah.
that one.
And that's a
Mhm.
combination meditate journal.
Okay.
I, c- I mean, maybe in the year's time, maybe a handful of times have I
Mhm.
meditated and not journaled. Those
Yeah.
always go hand in hand.
Okay.
Sometimes that's 5 minutes. Sometimes
Okay.
it's 20. I'm a big fan of the Deepak Chopra app. So there are
Okay.
all these apps you can get now,
Yeah.
but you can find what you're looking for. And then it's like when you go to a good bookstore and you don't know
Yeah.
the book you're looking for, and the book
Yeah.
finds you. It's the
Yes.
same sort of thing when I go onto that app because there's such a menu.
Mhm.
Um, the meditation that I need finds me. It's like
Nice.
every day I'm just like, how did that happen again?
You
You're
don't
right.
listen to the same one over and over again. You
Mhm,
do whatever
mhm.
comes and
That's right.
speaks to you.
And that's, I'm talking about the guided meditations, but there's
Right.
also just music. You can choose a
Okay.
5 minute music or a 10-minute music and then and not have the guided as well. And so
Okay.
I feel very strongly that as I've talked to you about how I would manifest things in my life, I'm
Mhm.
making them even better now because of the meditation,
That's
right?
nice.
And then the journaling serves the purpose of connecting what I felt and what I heard internally and putting it out there, like really putting pen to paper, and it connects the dots and sort of solidifies
Hmm.
what transpired. And so that's why I do the journaling as well.
Okay, tell us a little bit about the journaling because I'm not sure. So you do your meditation and then right after you'll have a notebook next to you and you just write whatever comes to mind, or you were thinking about something beforehand, you meditate and then come out with the answer, or is it all a combination?
Oftentimes it's a combination, but that's the case. I'll finish the meditation and I'll sit there quietly, and this
Mhm.
thing will pop into my head that was an answer to something that I was contemplating. The more you do it, the better you get at receiving the
The more you
signals and the
open.
information.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes I meditate and I always start from a place of gratitude. That just flows into something else. It
Yeah.
might be a challenge I'm ready to face today.
Yeah.
Um, Something that happened the day before that I want to capture and put on paper. When you're meditating, at least for me, I'm trying to be present and not in the past and not in the future.
Right.
So when I go to write, I try to write presently
Present.
what I'm feeling and thinking. That informs my future for sure, because I'll
Right.
have something that comes out. It's not like I go back and read it very often. It's just the simple act of putting it on paper, like
Right.
confirming what I am thinking and feeling. And that's the
Right.
confirmation, the writing.
When you're walking around or working with people, does this meditation continue? And how does it help you work better or even work with your clients better? You're talking about how the information flows and the answers come. Does that affect that in any way? Tell us about that a
That is
little
an excellent question.
bit.
So
Mhm.
I do what I call practice the pause. And this is a big part of the information in my book, too.
Okay.
One of my favorite quotes, Tom Kenyon says, "We are creating the world by how we speak to each other."
Okay.
So I take that to heart. I'm a really fast talker. You've already seen that the time we've been together. When I say practice the pause, that's a nanosecond
Yeah.
sometimes, right before something comes out of my mouth. I'm very intentional to think about what's in my heart and head and how
Mhm.
that informs what comes out of my mouth. And again, sometimes has to happen in a nanosecond. But if I'm about to speak to a family member, about to enter a meeting, about to coach one of my clients who's said something, and now I want to think about those two things, head, heart, and my intention with what I say next.
Right.
And that takes a lot of practice. It takes
I
a
was going to
lot of
say,
right. But that's where we get to practice the pause first. And let's say you're in the discussion, somebody says something, it's a trigger. It pushes your button. It's a trigger.
yeah,
Now I know to say, I'd like to think on that. What I'm really
okay.
saying in my mind is if I answer right now, it's not going to be what I intended.
Might not be beneficial.
It won't be the right connection between my heart and my mind. So I practice the pause. If it's preemptive, like you said, I'm going into a meeting or doing
Mhm.
something, it's like a 30-second meditation where I
Yeah.
take a deep breath, center myself, practice the pause.
Right.
And then I can do that much easier than I would have
Right.
if I didn't have this set meditation every day. Like I
Yeah.
know how to go to that place of pause
Yeah. You know
easier
where.
than I did before I was meditating more routinely. Coach people in a lot of Fortune 500 companies, and they're getting it. And
Yeah.
having that practice the pause, and you can call it whatever you want. It's a mindfulness moment, it's a
Mm.
moment of meditation, it's a way of centering. And
Yeah.
that centering then connects heart, head, gets us in the game the way that we want to be in it, the way we intend to be in it.
So, how did all of this transfer into you as a mom, into your daughter? I remember your dad teaching you that you could do anything. Did you purposely teach her that, or was it just, I mean, this is just what we do? It's like teaching if you're a really clean person, your daughter naturally learns it because you're always cleaning, that kind of thing.
Well, that did not happen. Opposite of that happened.
Me either. Me
Anyway,
either. Yeah.
I'm going to have to share another book. So there's a book
Yeah.
called Reviving Ophelia. It had it's been revised with her daughter. Any mother of daughters should read this book, but you need to
Okay.
read it when they're young because
Okay.
it's about how we choose words that influence them in a positive way. This whole word choice thing has been building for years for me.
Yes.
To your question, so I have a
Mhm.
son and a daughter. My
Okay.
son's 25, my daughter's about to turn 24.
Okay.
I have been very intentional in my
Okay.
word choices with them. I say this in the book. I'd see somebody on a backhoe and I would start to say, look at that guy in the field on that tractor. And I would stop myself and say, look at that person. Or we're going to see a new doctor. She such and such. I
Okay.
purposely changed pronouns to make
Oh,
it possible in their minds. I've been the main breadwinner in our
mhm.
families. My husband was the stay-at-home dad, and so
Yeah.
our children saw a whole different version of
Right.
work and that sort of family balance and dynamics as well. So that's had an effect on my son and how he
Mhm.
relates to women and how he is as well. So yes,
Okay.
very intentional. But that book is the one thing that changed my thinking about how my words would
Words.
influence them and influence how they look at the world.
Yeah.
As a parent, you have influence that can be super heavy. I
Yes.
felt that heaviness and wanted to get it right. Also, knowing, and my children have known this for years, that I didn't come out mothering with the sense that I would get it right. I
Okay.
would do my best. I've been very clear with them about it. I think there's not a manual on this. If there was, I'd be reading it, I'd get this straight.
Then I'd have the notes. I take the
That's right.
class. Yeah.
I like to research. My position has always been I'm going to do my best and we're going to work this out together. And it's still my position with them.
So you would say that out loud? You would actually say that to them? Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
I
I
think.
always did. I was a psychology major early on in school. I came at mothering as I'm going to be as transparent as possible. If the
Right.
transparency was unhelpful or harming, then I would
Right.
hold that back. But yes, very transparent. And I approached it in a collaborative way. They've made me the mother that I am. It's a partnership. I feed off of them and they feed off of me. And I'm going to come at it as like I have any other job. I would say, yes, I can. Or of course, I can
Yes.
be a good mom. But I have never been prepared to say that I will be the best mom ever because I didn't have an identification of what that was. And I will be the best mom for them, but that
Yes.
will be born out of the relationship that we have together.
And especially when the listeners are hearing this, because all children are different. They have different personalities. They have different ways of relating to the world and soaking up information. So I
Mhm.
think that's really great that you were open because kids are not stupid and they
That's
need to
it.
know things. They're here to try to understand. And if you're doing things and they don't get it, they're just like, you're stupid. I don't know if they say you're stupid until they become teenagers. But the
That's
point
right.
is that they need that from you.
That's right. You're going to force me to tell you one crazy story about me being so
Yes.
transparent. They
Yeah.
were probably 6 and 7, 5 and 6, something like that. They shared
Yeah.
a bedroom. And one night, we homeschooled them. We homeschooled our kids through the 6th grade too. But the stay-at-home dad thing my husband did was big. It was huge.
Yeah.
Anyway, I said to them, someday you will probably say, I hate you
Mm.
to me or to your father. And I just want to tell you right now, it's going to break my heart. So I said that. They burst out crying. And that was one of those
Oh,
times I thought, all right, maybe I went a little too far with this transparency this
yes.
time. They, they burst and
They're
they
like,
said,
no, mommy, we're sorry.
we will
Yeah.
never, ever do that.
Yeah.
And our son did it once, and that was
Okay.
that.
When he was
No, he was
older.
like
Okay.
13 or so.
Okay.
He knew
Yeah.
it right away. He had somewhere in his mind that conversation, and he
Yeah.
immediately knew that. So that's my transparency
So
playing out.
it probably wasn't too much. When you think of it's
Yeah,
almost like I gave you the awareness that when you're older, you're going to have these feelings.
that's right.
And one day you're going to do this. And this is how I'm going to feel about it. And then so
Yeah,
when it happened, he's sort of like, oh, she told me.
that's right. That's right. He knew it on some level.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
relate that all back to leadership too.
Okay.
It really isn't any different.
Yeah.
Choosing the transparency, choosing words that are supportive,
Yeah.
show more than you tell,
Yeah.
ask good probing questions. I cover this in the book. I'm not open, but close-ended questions. Did you have a
Yeah.
good day today? Was it fun at school? Yes,
Yes.
no, fine.
You get
That's right.
nowhere and you don't
Right.
understand anything more about them.
So, what was the funniest thing that happened today? Asking questions that start with what, how, or tell me
Yeah.
is the best approach for children, for those that are your
Yes.
direct reports, for your colleagues. I work hard at that now because that's where the meat is. That's
Yeah.
the meat of the conversation. And so working hard to delve into what's important to them by asking those open-ended questions. But it's the
Yes.
same in the workplace.
Yes, it really
Yeah.
is. It's all about communication and connection and understanding. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your stories and
Mhm.
your book. I think the work is incredible because I have always been a believer that words matter. I remember, I think it was Maya Angelou who at one point said something like, what if the words that you speak actually had physical power. And when you sent them out into the world, they did stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just
They
like,
do.
yeah, thank you so much for writing that book. And thank you for sharing a retreat. We will look you up online and connect with that retreat because that's going to be great. And I'm thankful for leadership really embracing this because
Yeah.
once the companies at the top get better,
Yes,
it'll
absolutely. Well, I
it'll
am very
filter.
grateful to be a part of your podcast and for the work that you're doing,
Thank
connecting
you so
women and their
much.
stories. Thank you.